So we're going to be talking today about the difference between loose lead and heeling. Which one is easier? Which one is what? What are we actually teaching the dog? What expectations do we have on the dog? The pros and cons of each. And very briefly, how, what goes into teaching those things, okay? Heeling is when a dog is in a specific position, in a position, moving with you with focus next to your leg, very much aware of where your body is and responding to the movement of your body. Loose lead walking is when the dog is anywhere around you on a lead, and that lead is never tense. There's always a smiley lead. So a dog who is walking to heel is actually loose lead walking at the same time. Most of the people I talk to, I support, and I help, most people aren't really that specific, and they don't necessarily feel like they need the dog to be walking to heel. Some people are pretty clear that they want their dog to walk to heel when asked. But a lot of my students and clients and people I support will say this. They will say, I don't need the dog to be right by my side. I just don't want them to pull like a train. I just don't want them to pull my arm out of the socket. Okay? And I wanted to speak into this today because this is often where a lot of people get stuck, because they're trying to reward the dogs for walking with a loose lead, which to the dog might not be clear enough requirement. The main mistake people make when they're trying to teach dogs to walk nicely on the lead is that they're not clear about what exactly they're teaching. So the dog doesn't really know exactly what gets rewarded. Two, they're trying to teach the dog to walk in a specific way with using the kind of rewards that the dog doesn't really want in that situation. So that happens when people try to teach their dog to walk nicely while being on a walk, and especially with adolescent dogs who, unlike puppies, tend to be more and more into their environment, more and more interested in sniffing, looking around, and being really, really present to all the interesting sniffs and things that the environment has to offer. And when we're trying to use food in that environment to teach the dog something new, we're likely to fail, because what the dog actually wants in that situation is to either get to the sniffs, or all the sniffs everywhere, or some particular sniff or some particular place. So they may be very forward focused because they know that sorry Raven, because they know that they're gonna get to their favorite field. That's where they get to go off lead, and they just can't wait to get there. Maybe they're just full of that energy and that excitement, and therefore their whole body is pumped with all those hormones that are about excitement and arousal, and all those hormones that are telling the dogs to move fast, paddle their little feet as fast as possible, swim forwards. You guys are familiar with this, I'm sure. They're so excited that they will find it hard to learn what it is that we want from them in that situation. We talked about arousal in a separate live chat. If you haven't seen that, it's worth seeing this, because it explains a lot about how dogs learn and how level of arousal influences how the dogs learn, how our dogs perform. And what we've learned in that session is that when dogs are very excited, learning something quite complex is not likely to happen. However, dogs who are very, very excited are still able to perform to a certain level of excitement. They're still able to perform well-known tasks. So if you're trying to teach your dog to walk nicely already on a walk, and your dog hasn't mastered all the criteria and requirement for walking nicely, whatever that is for you, then they're not gonna be likely to learn this with you while on a walk. And the other problem we talked about was the criteria. The criteria being the criteria, the requirements that the dog has to meet to be rewarded. The dog needs to first learn and become completely fluent in the tasks before we take that into the exciting environment. Now, that reward, when we're training away from the place where the dog usually pulls, will be most likely food. It can also be a toy, but most likely will be food, because food is a brilliant reward that can be delivered very fast. Dogs usually like it. We can get loads of repetitions. Criteria is what the dog has to do exactly, specifically, to be rewarded. And when we're training in our garden, when we're training in easy environments to start with, this will be the food. This will be the treat. Maybe not even a super high value treat. Then we go from not very high value treats to higher value food and to more variety in what we've got on offer. And eventually what we want is, we want our dogs to learn that they get to have the thing they want, and that thing they want is usually either sniffs. So they want to be able to sniff the grass, to go to the hedge where they know that they've seen a squirrel before and they want to go to that tree, or they want to go to the next lamppost, or they may need to, they are just like, they want to be able to keep going forward so that they can get to their favorite place faster. And eventually, at first we work with food, but eventually with enough steps and enough repetitions, dogs learn that the reward is the opportunity to continue walking forward, is the opportunity to get to those sniffs. That's the reward. We no longer need to be using food further down the line. Okay, but there's no point trying to fade food too early, because that transition between using food and using what we call an external reward, so the thing that the dog actually wants that we don't have in our hand, so the sniffs, the opportunity to greet another dog, the opportunity to stare at some birds, or go off lead on a beach or in a field, that's the reward. That's the functional reward. That's the external motivation that the dog that currently makes your dog pull on the lead. And we will teach the dog that will be the motivation to actually walk nicely. And the very topic of today was, what does it mean to walk nicely? Because for a lot of people, we think that when we say, I just want the dog, I just want them not to pull, they can sniff, I want them to be able to sniff and enjoy their walk, I don't need them to walk like a robot next to me in heel. For us, it's easy, just don't pull my arm out, just don't pull. But actually, from the dog's point of view, it's not at all clear. Think about how the dog knows they're not pulling your arm out. How does your dog know that they're not pulling your arm out? Well, usually they know because they have either a collar or a harness, and if there is a lot of tension on that harness or that collar or that lead, there will be pressure on their chest or on their neck. If there is pressure, a lot of pressure on their neck or on their chest, that's you're also going to be experiencing that in your arm, in your shoulder. And the problem is our dogs often don't necessarily connect the fact that they are controlling that pressure, and that is something that they need to not make happen. Does this make sense? Because if it doesn't make sense, then you know, from the dog's point of view, it doesn't either. And when our dogs are excited, in particular Spaniels, think of what Spaniels were bred to do. Spaniels were bred to have a very powerful desire to follow their nose and to follow their excited energy, their follow their instinct that leads them into cover and into bushes and hedges to flush animals, okay, and to pursue scents. These dogs are cockers and springers in particular. They were bred to have incredible levels of stamina, incredible levels of persistence, which means they will easily and gladly, a lot of those dogs will push with force into brambles, into cover, into you know, wire fences, into things where they might even get injured. And so many cockers, so many of our Spaniel people report that their dogs come back with, you know, injuries and torn ears and, you know, puncture wounds in the chest and all kinds of things, because they found an interesting scent and they pursued it into cover, and they got injured, and they didn't even feel it. They barely even felt it. They didn't care. So if that's the case, I'm doing another sandwich for Raven. Okay. How are they? You know, when they're in that level of, in that state of excitement, they don't care about getting injured. So, and we're asking them to care about, you know, to pay attention to a little bit of pressure on their neck. Of course, the little bit of pressure can actually make them struggle to breathe, but because our dogs are so persistent at, you know, pushing into this collar or into this harness, despite the fact that they're strangling themselves, that's, you know, that's not going to work. That's not going to be a clear way for them to, you know, to teach them what they need to do. Just telling them, just don't like, I don't know, don't cause pressure on your neck. That's just too abstract an idea. This is why I believe that for Spaniels, it's actually easier to teach them to walk to heel first. And once we teach them to walk to heel, and we're quite clear about what heel exactly means, these dogs, they need, our Spaniels, they need clear criteria. They need to have black and white, at least to start with. They need something to work with that makes sense. Their mind is quite literal. They don't like vagueness. And so we need to be super clear with them, and we need to give them an easy, straightforward rule to follow. And teaching dogs where to walk, for example, next to our leg, if we're clear about that, is actually fairly easy. It's an easier concept for a Spaniel, for most Spaniels, to grasp than walking with a loose lead, right? And once our dogs have mastered walking nicely on a lead to heel, then over time, when that has become a habit and when that has become very, very strongly ingrained, and we can teach this easily with rewards, and we don't ever need to use corrections for this if you don't want to. But once you've taught this, and once that has become a habit, we can relax those criteria, and we no longer require the dog to be in heel. And chances are that will fall apart. The heel will fall apart a little bit. is a lot to be said for loose lead walking, but I believe that loose lead walking is easiest achieved when the dog is calm. It's really easy to teach dogs to walk nicely on a loose lead when they're calm, or when they're much calmer and there isn't something specific they want to pull towards. That's why a lot of our dogs will walk nicely on their way back home. So if you can get your Spaniel to be calm at the beginning of a walk, or in the place where they normally pull, if you can get them to be completely chilled, calm, and not really care about going anywhere, then you're probably going to get a loose lead easily. If you don't think that's realistic, and I don't think that's realistic for most adolescent dogs, especially our working cockers and working type springers, then teaching them heel is much more realistic. Okay. So one thing you can do is to leave your walk for after you've done some really exciting activity with your dog, and then put your dog on a lead that's a little bit longer than a normal lead, and then do a mix of heeling and release to sniffing. Heeling and release to sniffing, and then again heeling and release to sniffing, and that way you are more likely to have a walk that will be satisfying to you and your dog. Walking to heel has clearer criteria. It has requirements for the dog that are easier for the dog to meet. If you are interested in learning how to do that, I invite you to join us for the Healing Crash Course. The Healing Crash Course teaches you some of the concepts that you can then later build on. And these concepts include walking slowly, being aware of your movement, where you are moving, how you are moving, where your body is moving, how it's moving, where it's going. Teaching the dogs to reorient back to you after they've been distracted by something. So to continue seeking you and orienting towards you. Teaching the dogs to turn and adjust their pace, their speed to yours. And just the heel position, where it is exactly and how much fun it is to be in that position, how to find it, and how to walk, how to move, how to find it in a stationary way when you're standing, teaching the dog to find that position all by themselves, or not by themselves, but that comes later, but easily to find that position easily, just with a hand signal, and then to keep that position while in motion. So we cover all this in the Sidekick Spaniel, in the Sidekick Spaniel 7-day crash course. That's what heeling is, and that's how we teach it. With loose lead walking, the best way to teach loose lead walking is to start with the dog in a really calm mind state, and then to teach the dog to be aware of how fast they're moving and where they're what happens to that lead, to that attachment. But I found in my experience with Spaniels, it's really not the fastest way. It's actually very frustrating, both for the people and for the dogs, to try to teach them loose lead walking before you teach heeling.